be available in the YouTube Adobe Analytics Champions channel. All right. Welcome to the June 2024 Adobe Champions office hours. There are three amazing presenters today that will be answering your questions: Nick, Judolin, and Megan. I'll be your host. My name is Lokesh Alluri, and I manage digital and marketing analytics for Lenovo, residing in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm responsible for all the DMP measurement, digital analytics activities across the globe at Lenovo. We will get started with our presenters introducing themselves, and then we'll take the questions. There are some pre-submitted questions. Maybe we'll start with those, and if you have questions, you can put them on the chat. Okay, who wants to go first? Megan?
Sure, I can. Hi, I'm Megan Powers. I am a senior manager of data governance at CarMax. I lead the team here who aims to capture all the pieces of our digital data and optimization. So our team owns Adobe Analytics and Target and Launch, as well as a couple other tools like Google Analytics and Full Story. I've been working in this field a long time. It's my second year as a champion. I'm also a Experience League community advisor, certified business practitioner expert in Adobe Analytics. Happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thank you, Megan. Nick?
Yeah, so I'm Nick Walter. I work at Kroger Digital. I'm a senior analyst there. I've been there for 5 years. Been working with Adobe Analytics for a long time. I am actually not an Adobe champion. I'm just here to help out where I can and answer questions the best I can. But yeah, over at Kroger, manage mostly customer interactions on the apps and the websites that Kroger's portfolio. How we can improve the site daily. So that's fun. Excited to be here.
Nick? And saving the last for the best. You're on. Looks like you're on mute. You're not on mute, but we can't hear you. No. Is it me? Can everyone else hear her?
I can't hear you. Now I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just had to switch my mic. Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you. So I'm Judeline Bag. I work for DHL. I'm a digital analytics manager, and I'm mainly responsible for data strategy and data maturity and really driving enablement within the data area at DHL. I'm also an Adobe Analytics Champion. It's my first year being an Adobe Analytics Champion, which I love, by the way. It's amazing to be part of this amazing community. And I focus at the Adobe Summit in EMEA last year on the Women in Digital Breakfast panel. I've been using Adobe Analytics now for and its predecessor, Adobe Insights and Adobe Data Workbench, probably about 9 years now. So I'm a real big fan of the tool. I think it's really, really powerful, and I'm really grateful to be here tonight. And it's really lovely to see you all, and we really look forward to answer all your questions. I'm just looking in the chat. I see there's another speaker who will also join us shortly as well. I don't know if they've joined us yet, but if not, then I think, yeah, we can probably start answering some of those questions.
Yeah, Anita is yet to join. Once she joins, I'll give her a minute to introduce herself, and we can go. But yeah, we can get started.
Thank you.
I'll share my screen with the pre-submitted questions, and you guys can go from there. Let me do that.
Yes, Steph, we did the workbench training back in the day in Washington, and Steph is on the call. How lovely. It's such a nice reunion.
I'm trying to share my screen. This share screen button isn't working. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Where is this? Let me read out the first question. When we have many apps in our portfolio, we are curious to see what is the activity on our apps in the first 30 days upon installation. How can we isolate this traffic only within workspace? We tried using sequential segments, but it has proven to be more difficult than anticipated. We are interested in overall consumption, video consumption, page view consumption only in first 30 days. I guess Megan, did you answer?
Yeah. So I posted here. My suggestion would be to use a cohort table. This was just a real simple one I built. You can get really, really detailed with these though, where you set your inclusion criteria of what you want to count. In this case, it sounds like just entry visits. So I have here like a, visit equals 1, and then visits as the metric. And then you can pull in whatever, you mentioned several metrics there in your question. You can pull in any metric you want and build a cohort table for each one of your returning metric and what you want to see. So what you can see here is the average time that gets spent between your first inclusion, so just visit number 1, and then your returning criteria of what they do after that. That'd probably be my suggestion. I'm sure there's, like many things in Adobe Analytics, there's probably lots of different ways to answer the question. So I'm curious what other folks think here.
I think it's noted down below that first launch is available for app. That's extremely useful. I've used that in the past to build out a table or a segment based off of that. I think that's very powerful. Me personally, I generally use, just like how that cohort is set up, I generally create a segment that's similar to visit equals 1 and then go from there. And then put in different date ranges that I'm moving the table so I can see my own aggregation of dates and everything. And allows it, I think for me, a little bit more flexibility as well.
Anyone else wants to add anything?
So yeah, as Nick already mentioned, I just added something at the bottom there around kind of fast launches. So something that might be helpful that you could try as well as a starting point as well, if you don't want to use the cohort analysis, although I actually think this is a really good approach, is you can look at the pre-built reports in Adobe. So if you navigate to reports and then go to audience mobile app, there's a retention report that's pre-built, and it gives you more data and insights around the fast launches. Now, I know you might still need to do a little bit more work in create a segment, maybe to understand like what were the actual, because that first launches are the first time that someone launches the app. But maybe by looking at that data, you can see like what's the kind of date range when people first started to launch the app. And then you can use that to create a segment to kind of understand when the app started being live. Otherwise, I guess the best approach would definitely then be to use a cohort analysis table as shown.
Yep, cohorts are definitely interesting for these kind of analysis. All right, thank you. Anita joined. Anita, do you want to introduce yourself before I go into the next question?
Yes, sure. My apologies for being late. I was having some technical difficulties, and apparently this meeting didn't want me to join, but here I am. I'm Anita Mummer. I am a senior consultant with BlastX Consulting, and I have been working with the Adobe tools for quite some time, since Omniture days. So I'm quite familiar with it. I've used it over the last 20 years or so. So I'm so excited. This is my first year as a champion, but happy to join and help out and answer whatever questions I can.
Thank you. I'll go to the next question. Can we tell when a user becomes a part of a test? Is it possible to determine when the target activity ID was first set?
Yeah. And I didn't have a bunch of great suggestions here, but a couple that came to mind were using a call to capture like your timestamp plus your visit ID plus your target activity experience, like maybe in an EVAR or something like that. That like is one to call, or like use classifications, put all those things together. Or you could fire maybe a custom analytics event when the moment someone is placed in a test, like EVAR or event 5, and capture the timestamp in the same hit, and try it that way. You could also, yeah, and then you'd be able to correlate them or create segments like that in the UI. But anyone else? Any ideas?
Yeah, I like the timestamp but plus visitor ID kind of segment that could help you identify the target activity when target activity was first set. Anyone else wants to add anything, or should I go to the next question?
No, I agree with you too. I think where we work, we have like 3 or 4 different test groups that somebody can be in, 4 or 5 different tests that can be running at the same time. So understand the importance here. But all of it's captured in a custom metric, and then we just, like you said, use the timestamp to figure out when and where and how.
All right, thank you. I'll go to the next question. This is a little bit bigger one then. What method would you recommend for migrating a website from Amplitude to AA, meaning Adobe Analytics? There are a couple of long answers here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really great question, and I think you could replace the word amplitude with fill in the blank analytics tool or no analytics tool. But I mean, so I haven't used amplitude, but things that are helpful for in any migration for me, for us, is like if you're new to Adobe Analytics, just take a whole bunch of training. There's tons of free options. There's Experience League Knowledge Base. There's the YouTube channel you can subscribe to. There's sessions like these. Like if you just sign up for various user groups, you'll automatically get on the distro for all those helpful sessions. If you're working with Adobe consultants, definitely leverage their expertise and make sure they're not just doing it for you, but teaching you along the way in case you don't have them forever. And then kind of some steps we generally take, comb through your site, make a list of all the KPIs you want to measure, put those in priority order because it might be very overwhelming depending on the size and complexity of your implementation. So you might want to implement in phases, like doing your most important KPIs first. You could also, depending on your situation, take an approach of doing the most important pages first. But if you have a choice, I'd recommend the KPI way because the pages could get messy, with if they're all in the same domain, with some having analytics and some not. You get some breaking when you tried to do pathing and stuff like that. If you are able to, I'd suggest having the two sources overlap between Amplitude and Adobe Analytics so you can compare the production data. I would not expect it to match one-to-one. That's the nature of web data, right? There's always noise. But if you can test it at the same time, you can see, does it trend the same way? When I see a spike in Amplitude, do I see a spike in Adobe Analytics? And you can start to measure the difference in that magnitude between the two data sources. And that way, you'll have you'll have your historical data, you have the period of overlap data. And then once you go new, like, well, you can tell your stakeholders, we expect it to be about this much different than what we're reporting on before. Some general suggestions to coming up with tagging requirements. We try to approach tagging from a customer's point of view. So maybe things work certain ways on the back end, and there are ways you can capture that. But if a customer's seen something as on one's experience, I would tag it that way. start building a variable map. There's solution design reference. I think any Adobe person will be able to give you something like this, but that's a helpful way to keep track of all your custom EVARs, props, events, where they fire, when they were added, like what date they were added, and then build your requirements. Like you'll have some things you want to always fire on page load, but then some things you'll want to fire on custom click or custom events. It's really helpful to add screenshots anywhere you can. Definitely. And, I don't know the nature of your implementation, but make sure you consider any third-party tags when migrating. Make sure you consider any other integrated tools like Target, potentially something else. So.
Lots of great answer to a very good question. So to summarize, one is training or adoption, where you go through the YouTube videos, or there's a nice course put up by Eric Matzhoff on LinkedIn. So you familiarize yourself and train. Second one, as you said, is to put up that measurement framework to see what is firing, when that is firing, what are the custom metrics, what is the source of those. Two is to have established that whole framework. And then three is to consider all the first party plus third party and any integrations that the product is delivering to Target or to Audience Manager, etc. Yeah, it's very exhaustive answer, Megan. Thank you.
That's how I roll.
Anita, you answered.
Yeah, and I just to add on to what Megan said, everything she said is like, as you mentioned, this could be for any implementation, but these are great. This is a great checklist. I'm going to keep this because I think I could probably use that. But I did want to just point out that like Amplitude is an event-based tool, so it's kind of like GA4 Mixed Panel. So you're going to notice that some of the metrics are going to be they're calculated differently, and from what I understand, Amplitude you kind of have to fake that a little bit. So that's one thing just to be aware of. I think when switching platforms, and this happens with GA4 too, is that you wind up with numbers that are just not the same. And I think, as Megan said, don't expect that to be the same. But and after 6-8 months or so of being on the new platform, when you realize, okay, well, the trend is the same, it's generally in the correct ballpark, then you can get rid of having the dual tagging is very good. It's very important. And of course, again, there's always a learning curve when you're moving from one platform to another. And in my experience, people seem to be a little reluctant to try to learn in Adobe, just the general user population in your organization. So whatever ways you can sort of evangelize training and just make sure that everybody's getting on board and they know how to use, because I think Adobe Analytics is amazing, but I've also been using it for a long time. So it's just training is important and making things easy for them, setting up a lot of things for them and kind of walking them through it is probably going to be necessary. And I think the last thing I said was just if you have a tag manager like Telium, that's actually pretty easy to do a migration like that. So if you already have a data layer in place, you can just map those same data layer variables to events and EVARs in Adobe. So that would probably be the least of your problems if you've already got something like that in place. So just a few extra things I wanted to point out. But other than that, sounds like a great migration.
Yeah, definitely a good checklist. You just added few more things to the checklist. Great.
Yep.
There is also Inglu also posted a nice documentation, the comprehensive guide for transitioning to Adobe Analytics from Google Analytics. That's a great source. For the change of it, I'll take one question from the chat. It's a very interesting question. So how to calculate bounce rate on SPA, meaning single page applications? With single metric, it won't be possible, but what other metrics shall we include to get accurate data for business? So I see, Megan, you answered that one, suggesting to create a custom metric of whatever metric was important to you, divided by entries to get custom bounce rate. Does anyone wants to add anything to that?
Yeah, and my goal there was just, if you're not getting page, if the page is refreshing, but because it's a spa, it's not being counted as a page. just think of some other metric that might be meaningful to you that you are able to track, like clicks or something.
Yeah, you're right. Any event that happens on the page during the load or after it loads, though the page doesn't refresh for each click or interaction, you can ask your developers to populate a direct call rule for those interactions and use those for feed those to create a custom bounce rate kind of metric. I'll take one more question. This is by Tejpal Shiny. Is there a way to analyze server-side A/B testing using A4T? Anyone?
This is the other question in the chat.
Yeah. Is there any way to? I think you answered it here.
Yeah.
Is there any way to analyze a server-side A/B test using A4T? Do you want to answer it for the audience? Or?
Sure. I mean, in theory, if you have A4T set up, the way you analyze server-side tests in Workspace is the exact same as analyzing a client-side test. Like the A4T panel still works. In theory, that they still appear as activity dash experience in Workspace, etc. However, I know, and I don't know if it's the way our site was set up or what. I didn't get the impression that it was a global server-side target issue, but maybe it was. I only really had line of sight into our implementation, but we did have to engage client care and do quite a bit of dev work to make that happen for us. So I would probably start, if it's not working as you expect, I would probably start by opening the client care ticket and letting your success manager know. And, I'm not a developer. I don't know all the things we had to do, but I know it involved changing how, I don't even remember now, like the way app measurement was sending stuff, like the visitor IDs and stuff like that. So sorry, that was not a great technical answer. In theory, it works the same way in the analysis part once it gets there, but you may need to do some custom dev work to get it there the right way.
Yeah, thank you. All the questions in the chat are answered. There are some lengthy answers and some documentations that were referred to, so keep them coming. There are very talented champions and some people in the group that would answer the questions for you. I'll continue with what was submitted. So the next question is there a way to build a flat table in Workspace? Anita, you answered it.
No, there is not. Not currently. But it is, from what I understand, is on the roadmap, and I don't have a date. I don't know, but it was mentioned at Summit this year, and I've heard it in some of the roadmap calls I've been on in the last month or so. So it's coming. It's under consideration, and I think they're aware that people kind of want it. But I know that Judeline had a good option, alternative option.
Yes, I guess I was just thinking, does it have to be in Workspace? Because obviously while we're waiting for this potential new feature to come out, if it is coming out, which I think will be fabulous, there is also a data warehouse, which I use a lot, particularly if we have like anything with multiple dimensions that you want to export. That it does help you kind of build that flat table. And I think what's really nice is in data warehouse, we could actually export it as like a Tableau file as well. So if you do happen to use something like Tableau as your BI tool, you can export it as a Tableau report version of the file, and it's really easy to then put into your reporting as well. That's probably going to be one of the best options at the moment if you want to get like a real flat table with like multiple columns as well, with multiple dimensions and multiple rows of metrics as well. I guess the alternative is, and again, I don't know what you want to do with the data, but you could also, use the Power BI connector for Adobe Analytics and actually connect straight into the data. So again, I don't know how you wanted to use that data, but there are other options as well available, obviously, that you could explore in the meanwhile.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Does anyone else have any other thoughts around that?
The new BI connector from Adobe is also available now, but it's only for CJA. So
Oh, that's
if
cool.
if anybody has CJA, I've been playing with it. It's a pretty cool tool, but you could also accomplish this. And then the Excel plugin, which the name of it escapes me.
Report Builder. Report Builder?
Yeah, you can do
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking about that too.
I love Report Builder.
It's handy.
But hopefully they'll launch it for AA soon. I'm using CJA, or we're implementing CJA for Lenovo at the moment. Yeah, it's a really powerful tool to play with. Those are the pre-submitted questions. I see a bunch of questions that are here. I'll go with. Okay, yeah, let me get one. Yeah, this is an interesting question. We face this a lot with global presence. How could I identify an issue or a bot that is inflating our unique visitor metrics? Maybe usually it is any metric at all. How could I identify an issue or bot that is inflating my metrics? Anyone?
So at one point we've done a lot of research and created a segment of how things to identify as best we can anything that looks like bot behavior and then kick it out. There's super long segments. I don't remember what all was in there, but we did a lot of research to do that. Now there's also some third-party people that we use to help kick those out as well. So that's what we rely on mostly, so we don't have to have a global segment over every workspace anymore.
You could also use something I've done in the past to identify bots. So obviously if the bots are not automatically filtered out and it's not in your bot reports and it's not filtered out, what you could also use is contribution analysis. So if you can see like any particular, like sometimes it's the same kind of browser or device, or even maybe an IP location that's really driving up your unique visitor numbers, you could also run like a contribution analysis if it is creating an anomaly on your data. And then it might give you a bit more information. And what you could also do is if you maybe have the user agent tracked, you could then feed that into your IT team and they can see if they can actually block that particular bot. So there are ways, I guess, that you could try and use the data to identify it by using contribution analysis. I always think it's really, really helpful for that kind of thing. If you have tokens available, it's a great use of that. And then help identify and pinpoint that bot and then ask a team, like your IT team or whoever's responsible to block that on your system to actually block that for you.
Yeah, and I mean, a couple bot things in general. We use the, in the Adobe admin settings, you can use the IAB bot filter to automatically filter that stuff out. You can also filter out by certain IP addresses if you've already identified bots. You could probably create some alerts, like segments of, same visitor ID and X over X many hits in a certain time, within X amount of time. That might be a bot, right? And so you could create alerts for that based on that segment or metric. That could be a way to get notified. It's like, this is probably not a human who, has 50 visits in 30 minutes or something like that.
Right, great answer. So exclusion segments to identify and exclude the bots. The default apps, there are some vendors that we use too, like Nick called out, that would identify bot. We pick up, we ask them to feed us through data layer and we exclude it through that. Third one is a very good answer from Judeline. Contribution analysis or other kind of analysis to feed your IT to block similar bot feature. And last but not least is any kind of alerts that you can create saying time related one. Great answers. All right. The CJA to Adobe Analytics 1, there is a lot of documentation on it, and I believe the help doc was pointed there. It's a good read. But in general, Adobe Analytics is more of web data, but CJA is more of BI. You can feed non-web data to create that unique customer profile that is based out of all data sets that you have for your company. I'll take the next question.
Just to add on to that real quick, CJA workspace is the same as AA workspace. It looks and functions the same. It's just the data sets behind it.
Yeah, that's a great one. The look and feel of CJA is all the same, so that helps a lot with adoption of CJA. But it is just probably Adobe Analytics 2.0 and more powerful Adobe Analytics.
There is also product analytics, I guess, and some of the extra visualizations that you get through CJA that obviously I don't have CJA, but I have played around with it. And I think that's like another extra feature that it has, that you can do really cool visualizations with it as well. That's already pre-built into it that you won't get with Analysis Workspace.
Okay, so the
Some
next
of my,
question.
I was going to say really quick. Can I talk about CJA real quick before we? One of my favorite features is just the ability to be able to transform the data, like so you can correct things like typos or misspellings, or you can even remove data on the fly. And if you make a mistake, you can undo it and it comes back. It's all of the transformations are done at report runtime rather than at the time that they're collected on the website. So extremely flexible in that way, and have it's the ability to just kind of recombine different EVARs and dimensions however you want, even after they've already been collected, is quite amazing and powerful. So I'm a big fan. That's it.
There was a couple of summit sessions that there are recordings out, being able to do that. If you're interested in CJ, I highly suggest going and watching some posters.
Yeah.
It got me pretty excited for it.
I know.
Yeah, we got it started on CJA. A lot of CJA fans here. So looks like this is a very popular question with 13 replies. So I'll ask this one. Is there a standard to track link clicks specifically in the scenario of navigation event to other pages in the same website? We have been facing an issue where we lose link click events because my assumption there is not enough execution time between the click and the page change to send a network request. I know in data collection you have the option to delay the link from the action, or the document will unload from send event using AEP Web SDK. Jen sent a documentation. There is an answer from Indrapreet saying you can utilize activity map to track link if it goes from one page to another. Yeah. Jen, a veteran champion, still a strong champion in the current group, answered quite a bit of it. I use activity map for 95% of our click tracking and haven't used the extension for a year. The activity map data still appears in your reports in case you do not know. Anyone else wants to take a stab at it? On the link?
I would definitely have as well. Probably, I'm a big fan of activity maps, so I would recommend using activity map as well if possible. I think it's a really powerful feature for if you wanted to like also check that your links are actually tracking as they should be. It's almost like a nice little quality checking feature that's available if you have it activated, that you can also check to see if maybe the events are not firing or they are firing correctly, and yeah, those links are tracking. And then I would say those still, it's worth obviously implementing link tracking specifically if you can. I mean, at DHL we use like a universal tracking framework that we try and like, track all of the certain types of links more uniformly across the website. But yeah, also use Adobe Analytics like activity map where we can, if anything is not tracked, also just to check that the links are tracking as expected.
Thank you. There is also a link to Megan's blog relating to linkage that was put in the chat. Feel free to go through it. I just quickly glanced at it. It's a good blog. Yeah, someone asked a question on e-commerce. As I belong to the e-commerce group, I'll post this question, not answer it. One of our e-commerce sites is trying to record cart value tracking. When a user visits a cart page, we'd like to record the value of the cart. We have tried using an event and EVAR, but the value seems to grow exponentially in reporting each time the page is visited instead of capturing the actual value of the card. Is there a way to collect that specific value on each hit or page view? Megan?
Yeah. Sorry, scrolling. Yeah, one thing I put in there is using a numeric event instead of a counter event. That's a way to capture a value at a certain moment, and that then you can treat it like in calculated metrics, like a quantitative value. Like we do that, for example, on our search results page to capture the number of cars that are displayed at any given search load. That way, we also capture that like in a prop, but capturing it as a numeric event allows us to add and subtract it. And it captures it finitely and doesn't. So I don't know if that would work for your situation, but you could explore doing that.
Okay.
So with what we do is we've actually had this conversation at Kroger as far as capturing cart value when somebody views the cart. But if we capture it as a as a metric that's changing, that's being added to and then divided by how many people do it to get an average cart value, that's so all over the table. Somebody can look at their cart early on in their shopping experience and then later on in their shopping experience, and then we kind of get these weird numbers all over the place. So what we ended up doing is we only actually get cart value and size, so number of items in cart at checkout, because at that point they're done. Yeah, they're done adding to their cart, and if they're not, then they got to go make another order anyway. So we kind of start over. But that way we can get an accurate average basket size, and average order value. So I don't know what your specific use case is, but might be something to consider.
And I think someone else said a prop. You could try a prop too, because that's more hit based. And I like that. Someone else said it's like cart view ID or something. Then you could tie like the prop with that ID, like in the same hit. Just all things to try.
Okay, there's one more. Is there a way to make sure to figure out data layer inconsistencies, like report saying broken data layer or anything? We are trying to implement ObservePoint for these kind of issues. I don't know if anyone else is creating anything of a report of sorts that would point out broken data layer.
Maybe Observe Point. We've used that before.
Yeah. I mean, if the data is broken, the data doesn't hit the report. So I don't think we can create a report on Adobe Analytics except using tools like ObservePoint to monitor the data layer and cite the inconsistencies and limit the data lies and going
Yeah, I mean,
bunch.
if you have an Adobe Analytics variable that's feeding off a certain data layer element, though, that's going to break the Adobe Analytics data. So whatever else you're doing to get monitored, you can also create Adobe Analytics alerts that will let and we do this a few ways. We do both, like, does it fall off the cliff, like drop below 10 a day, or does it hit an anomaly threshold? Because likely you have EVARs, props, events, whatever, pointing to things in your data layer, and if they break, the analytics is going to break. So you could use the Adobe Analytics alerts for that. But
yeah, the usual alerts definitely are an option. Setting up threshold alerts or data type alerts, kind of.
yeah, I've also heard some of our QEs quality engineers have run Python scripts that will crawl the code base on the site, and they're automated, so it's not manual, like someone's not crawling it themselves, but checking for those things. That'd be a more developer type thing, but that's a possibility too, is just to create a custom automated audit that runs proactively.
Yeah, for sure. If your IT is super talented, they can run the automation test scripts to monitor and check for the data layer inconsistencies. That's another option. There is one question, I think two questions that are unanswered. I am not sure whether you meant this in CJA terms or AA, because I haven't used Power BI connector for AA. So the question is, does the Power BI connector consider deduplication?
It your data in Power BI, regardless of which connector you're using, will look exactly the same. Should look exactly the same as what you get in Workspace.
Okay, so if there is deduplication here, there would be deduplication there too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was just also thinking, I'm not really sure I really exactly understand that question. But yeah, the data should be the same. It shouldn't. Yeah, if there is duplicates in your analysis workspace project, that will still be in the Power BI data as well. But yeah, I don't know why there would be duplicates, obviously. So yeah, I don't really understand it. But it won't create any duplicates, if that makes sense. It shouldn't do.
Yeah. There's one more question on classifications, which is, I have found it difficult to use classification sets. Will the legacy way of creating classifications be deprecated? Would you share any best practice when using classification sets? I'm not sure what legacy way of creating classifications is, but we at Lenovo, we use for you know some manual classification. We use classification rule builders. Of course, we follow the instructions. There is clear set of instructions in the documentation on how to upload classifications, create classifications, all that. So for manual, we use classification rule builders, but there is also an automated FTP way where you upload an empty .fin file with the exact same name as the actual classification. That's an automated way where we get the classification data. Our engineering team or ETL team built an automated script that continuously posts files into that FTP location. That's what we use at Lenovo for classifications. I'll check for that documentation and I'll link it here. Does anyone else have anything to add there?
I don't have anything specific about classifications in Adobe Analytics, but in CJA, it's like a whole nother ball game. So there are more options, and actually classifications isn't really a thing in CJA. So if there's a consideration of moving to that at some point, just be aware that it does get easier in that tool. So.
Okay, Mandy is helping me post some questions, pre-submitted questions. Maybe we have time for two more. So do you have any suggestions for pulling data with multiple dimensions from a workspace, that is by day and another dimension? For dimensions that have many values, that is, I don't want to drag and drop the second dimension on top of an individual day 14 times if I'm looking for a breakdown over 2 weeks.
Can you put it in I'm sure there's, again, lots of ways with this. Can you put it under the metric in the metric column instead of like on the left and the dimension, like under the dimensions? That might help you not put it like individually 14 times and just apply to all the dimensions you have on the left.
Yeah, also you can use shift to select all and drop a dimension there. But you down, you don't have to do it 14 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. One more. Well, Jeff, thank you. There are questions, a lot of questions coming. Would like to understand booking conversions when search can be done using different workflow on the website. Venn diagram allows to see searches in 3 workflows. Is there another way where I include more than 3? Fallout does not work for this as it's visit based. Flow is difficult to manage. Thanks. Any visualization suggestions?
So yes, the Venn diagram is limited to 3 at the moment. Unfortunately, we can't go beyond that. I mean, I haven't quite seen your data to really understand exactly what their booking conversions look like. But if your booking conversions are the same thing at the end, I don't know if it's maybe, I know you've already said, but maybe we could use a fallout chart, but then create a segment for each of the different workflows and drop them next to each other in a fallout chart. So if they all have a similar conversion journey later on, then maybe you could understand the differences between them. But I don't know if there's any other way you'd be able to do that, really.
Yeah, and I think this question was asked earlier up in the chat, so there's a few replies here. Jeff posted there a link to a user group session on product analytics, which is probably great because Jen's leading it. Let's see. A couple things I suggested were, you can definitely use the attribution panel I've found really helpful in Workspace. That's just if you go to the upper left in Workspace with like segment comparison and A for T and stuff, there's an attribution panel there. And that's a really good way to compare all the different ways that your customers could come to your site, and they do often overlap in the real world, right? So you can use the out-of-box attribution models like Last Touch, and then there's a whole bunch of other cool ones like J-curve, U-curve, Inverse J. But then you can also create your own as well. Like if you didn't like the percentages assigned to J-curve, you can make your own. That's been really helpful. Potentially also using sequential segments. Did they do this and this and this? You can use fallout or flow, but if, like you said, it's difficult to trend flow and fallout, like you always right click is helpful. You could create a segment from those nodes and trend those nodes over time. So I would suggest right clicking on flow and fallout and then trying either sequential segments or definitely the attribution panel.
Yeah. Sequential segments is definitely an interesting one. I haven't used it. I'll try that one. Thank you, Megan. I did not see this was a repetitive one. I see the replies now. Okay, another interesting question. How can you best minimize the amount of typed or bookmarked hits on Adobe Analytics profile? Very common problem.
Put it at the end of your marketing channels. That's one. And another one is to not check the override button when you're setting up your marketing channels. So like, for something like paid search or email, I probably would have it override your Last Touch, but for typed in bookmarked, I would not, because they're either coming there direct, in which case you captured them, or they're coming back from a previous source. So those are two things I do, is put them at the end of marketing channels, because that works like a waterfall. If it matches the one on the top, it's going to stick there. It's not going to keep going to match other rules. And then don't check the override button, because then the other sources will get more traffic.
Two basic but most important things for typed and bookmark problem. Thank you, Megan. Anything else to add, anyone?
You can also make sure your paid search settings are correct, like your other marketing channel settings are correct. They're pulling in the right stuff, and that you have all the appropriate internal channels, so that that's getting bucketed as internal and not typed in bookmarked.
Yeah, I was just going to say your internal URL filters need to be set up correctly, exactly, so that it knows like what's bookmarked and what's not and what's typed as well. So I think that's also something just to have a look at. And also I think sometimes we've seen this, that I don't know, it could be that sometimes things like redirects could also cause problems. Sometimes, I don't know, the marketing channel tracking that has been set up could potentially cause a redirect, and that redirect could then make it look like if someone has come from a bookmarked link or they've typed it in, but actually they haven't. So again, it's always helpful to have a look at the source of the traffic to see like if potentially there was some redirects or some kind of URL shortness or something that was being used that could potentially have caused your typed bookmark to go up as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. There is a setting in marketing channels that you can say, like, is not, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but you can basically tell, like, the previous hit isn't from an internal URL to address that redirect problem.
Great points. Thank you. Okay. There's one more. Do you have any sessions for pulling data with multiple domain? Okay. Sorry, I already asked that one. Assuming end user, this probably is our last question. Assuming end users have access. Oh, this is moving really fast. Assuming end users have access to a number of different report suites, is there a way for us to limit a particular workspace dashboard so that they can only use a specific set of report suites for it? So can we limit user access by particular workspace dashboards, though the users have access to multiple report suites?
You could definitely set up like a user group or a product profile that they only have access to particular report suites. So then when they go into analysis workspace, they will only be able to see those report suites that you want them to see. And I'm not sure if that's how I understood the question, but I guess that's how we do it a lot at DHL, because we have so many different websites and it's managed by different people. So we have lots of virtual report suites and report suites, and we just give certain people access to certain product profiles that we set up for them. Then they can only see those report suites, but they might be able to use the same analysis workspace template that we've built, but just for the ones that they can actually access. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
We do the same. We sell in about 30 countries, and there are multiple types of sites. Like one is e-commerce, obviously. Second is the support site. Third is the Lenovo Social or various other server-related sites. So we set up multiple virtual suites or multiple user groups inside the admin portal, and we provide access to that particular group, whether they are product or support, etc. But I wasn't sure on how to do it particularly for a workspace when they have the access to entire report suite. Probably you can create a separate user base that would entitle your need and give access only to that. Okay.
I'm not in them very often, but view only version of the report, I don't think you can change the report suite. I'm not 100% because I very rarely am in a view only report. But
yeah, I think there's lots of ways to limit or curate what people see. You can do that in a workspace itself by limiting the data and curating the data. You can do that with virtual report suites, which these folks have mentioned, but probably, like Judah said, like the fastest way to limit report suite level is probably at the user access level, because otherwise it's kind of manual by workspace or by virtual report suite. So
we have 3 minutes. I want to give a shout out to what Mandy posted. The applications for next Adobe Analytics Champions class are extended till June 21st. So you have another week, a day over a week, if you are interested to be a champion. This program has greatly helped me. This year is my first rookie champion year. This program has greatly helped me meeting a lot of talented individuals, practitioners in the industry. Made good connections with product group of Adobe. Just attending these calls, user discussions, etc., has greatly helped me enhance my knowledge. So I would highly encourage you all to apply and throw in your hat to see if you would be a part of the champions group for this year. Thank you. I guess there's no other questions, so we end 2 minutes early, unless you guys have anything to add.
No, thanks for moderating.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Lukash.
Thank you. There are
Thanks,
very interesting
everyone.
questions for attending, everyone. Over 60 participants. This is appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.